Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, whenever the fuck you're tuning in. This is a mid-season edition of Buckets brought to you by BackYard Sports. We're talking some interesting topics this week. We got everybody in the house. We'll start with you, Bentley. Happy trails, Ricky Rubio. How you doing, man?
I'm good, man. I'm not as good as Ricky Rubio, who just retired today. Shout out that guy. I feel like I'm getting old. I remember when he was coming into the league, the hype surrounding him. He's been playing, I believe he's 33 years old, and he's been playing professional basketball since he was 14.
Yeah.
That's over half of his life. So
Yeah.
Shout out to him for a wonderful NBA career. It's a joy to watch when he was healthy.
20 years of pro ball and a lot of those in the world's premier basketball association. So happy trails to him for sure.
Yeah.
Ryan, how you doing, man?
I'm good. I was sad to see Rubio retire, but I think his Achilles and knees and stuff were pretty beat up. I did see a clip right before we came on where Shaq tried to call him I think he tried to call him the Spanish Pete Maravich. Like, it was either Spanish or Italian, and I think Italian's funnier because he's not Italian. But I just love Shaq like trying to give people nicknames that clearly are not going to catch on.
Yeah,
that's
the big Aristotle, right?
Yeah, it would be different if it's like, oh, we'll call him the Spanish Pistol or something to try to like
there you go
match Pete Maravich, but he's like the Spanish Pete Maravich. Who's gonna call him that?
Yeah, no.
This doesn't make
not
any
gonna
sense.
happen. Too much of a mouthful.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's jump right into it. We're getting close to the deadline. We talked last week or the week before about some potential deadline deals we thought might fit in terms of player and scheme and team. Maybe giving some contenders a couple of pieces that aren't necessarily fits on their current teams. We had a trade go down this week, a fairly high-profile trade. I know kind of all year we've speculated whether the Raptors would actually tear it down. And when I saw the news break that they were trading OG Anunoby, before seeing what the Knicks were giving up, I thought maybe they are going to tear it down. And then I saw that they got back RJ Barrett and Emmanuel Quickley and a second-round pick, which is typically a wash, but more draft capital. They gave up Anunoby, they gave up Prince Achiuwa, and they gave up Malachi Flynn. I think it's almost kind of a fair trade. I think it really hinges on how you feel about RJ Barrett, right? I'm a little bit bullish on RJ Barrett in terms of how I think he fits in the NBA with his play style. Knicks are clearly out, and I know a lot of people who don't feel as strongly about him as an NBA player as I do. So I think evaluations of this trade probably hinge on how you compare him to OG Anunoby, right? Emmanuel Quickley, though, I think is a good get for the Raptors as well. I think the Knicks are going to miss both of those players. But when you can get a guy like OG Anunoby, and I think the Prince Achiuwa addition helps a lot. So I'm going to kick it over your way, Ryan. I want to get your thoughts on this trade. How do you feel about it? How do you think the Knicks did? How do you think the Raptors did?
Yeah, I think you can kind of view it as a pretty even trade. I think that's a fair assessment. The key points of the trade is, I think really this is an Emmanuel Quickley trade and not as much an RJ Barrett trade from like what Toronto's getting back. I think Quickley is a legitimate potential all-star level player who I think needs someone around him who's a playmaker and has some size, which that's what Toronto does pretty well, especially with Scotty Barnes, right? I think the weakness of Quickley is not huge for his position and not a great playmaker. Like, he's a scoring guard, right? And I don't mean that in the position. I mean that in his capability. So I think being next to Scotty Barnes and being the outlet scorer for them is a good fit. RJ Barrett, I don't love his fit in Toronto. They already don't have a ton of shooting, and he's been a very inconsistent shooter in his career. There's been signs this year, right before the migraines hit him, that he was like becoming an above average 3-point shooter. And then he was out for the migraines, and it was pretty much went away. He can't finish at the rim, which is sad for a guy who is an elite driver. He gets to the rim, but never finishes. He's like I think he's a below 50% finisher at the rim, which is, not great for a guy who gets there as easily as he does and is physically intimidating. Like, he's a big guy, he's broad-shouldered. You figure he'd be able to finish, but maybe going home will help him out. There's no pressure in playing in your hometown, as everyone knows. Your family won't come see you. Your friends won't come see you. There's no pressure at all. So I'm hoping that helps him out. From the Knicks side, I think Anunoby, like I said, I think it's a wash, but I think Anunoby is a good fit there. The Knicks were a guard-heavy team. They had a ton of guards on that team, and still do. Like, they got rid of two guards, and if you can call Barrett like a wing, but handled the ball some. They still got like 5 guards there that they can play in that rotation if they want to. I think what's interesting from the Knicks perspective is they got like the Swiss Army knife they were looking for, and I think it allows them to create a foundation team building wise to get a star, right? If it's like, hey, Jalen Brunson and Anunoby are the guys, and we want to be in a position where we can trade for the third guy. Because I don't think they think that Randall's the guy. I think they think Randall's like a piece to give to in a star trade because of the contracts. So I think this is a good foundation for them to facilitate a third player, whether that be this season or next season. But I think it's good because I don't think Jalen Brunson and Anunoby wins you a championship. So I think you got to try to make a third move or get a third player at a level above Randall, whether that be like a Markkanen or someone like that. But I think it's a very good foundation, and I think it makes free agency better for them too because they'll be more desirable. They're already desirable because of the Knicks, and they play in Madison Square Garden. But they're also a foundational team with an all-star and the ultimate role player in OG Anunoby. But yeah, that's my major points there. I think there's a lot of minor stuff with it as well, but that's all I really have on that.
Yeah, I feel like we've been saying that about the Knicks for a long time, right? Like, they're going to go try to get a star, and they just haven't been able to land them. The Randall signing was kind of like the big, right? Obviously there was the Kristaps move, which didn't necessarily work out the way they wanted it to. The Carmelo Anthony move that didn't work out the way they wanted it to. You would think that Madison Square Garden and the Knicks is a free agent destination. There's been a lot of talk that like Dolan is the reason that nobody wants to go play for the Knicks, right? So if they can get over that hump, get that third guy, and maybe it has to be via trade, right? Maybe it is one of those things where they package Randall and whatever other capital they can throw with it to entice a team to give up a star. Maybe that makes sense for sure. Because I think you pair them, as you mentioned, right, with OG and Jalen Brunson. I think if you get one big time guy that it doesn't seem that Julius Randle is going to turn into, and obviously the Knicks feel the same way about RJ Barrett. He's not going to become that. Maybe that's the move for sure. Bentley, how do you feel about this trade?
I like this trade a lot more for the Knicks in the immediate future, right, than I do necessarily for Toronto. This is a deal. OG is going to be coming up on expiring, I believe, next summer. This is a deal they don't do unless they have kind of a handshake or verbal agreement with his representatives that, like, we're going to accept this trade, and then I'm going to stay long term, right? So I love the fit with OG in New York. They didn't really have a small forward, like, wing guy. They have Randall, who's, he's a new age 4. He can play 5 in the small ball. But I love OG because now they can play a really large lineup if they really, really want to, right? When Mitchell Robinson comes back, they play him at the 5. You play Precious 2 at the 4, play Randall at the 3, play OG at the 2, and then you have the small guard Brunson, obviously. But, like, that's a really, really big lineup. And then they can also go the other way and play Julius Randle up, and they can play OG at the 4, right? And they can fill out the 1, 2, 3 however they feel best suits them. Josh Hart or – I would say Emmanuel Quickley, but obviously he's in Toronto now. Just whoever they feel, because like Ryan mentioned, they have like still like 4 kind of guys that they like to rotate with DiVincenzo, and whoever else they feel best suits that backcourt, right? So I really, really like it from the Knicks side. Precious Achiuwa is a guy that I really liked when he got drafted to Miami. He was a key part of that deal, getting Kyle Lowry down from Toronto. So obviously Toronto really liked him. I don't know that he really developed or panned out as well as they'd hoped him to. So they not that they just threw him in this trade, right? Because obviously the Knicks needed a big man. But he was a guy that I really thought highly of coming out of college and going to Miami, and then obviously ending up on his third team in as many years, or in third team in 4 years, I believe. Hopefully he can develop, and Tibbs will take a liking to him, and we can see him grow as a player there. Now for the Toronto side of this, I like the Quickly fit. I don't love the RJ Barrett fit, right? RJ, his downfall in New York was that they were forcing him to play at the small forward position, right? Which is now where OG is. When he goes to Toronto, they're going to force him to play at the small forward spot once again, because as we've already seen after the trade went down, Quickly came in and made an immediate impact. He was the leading scorer in their game last night or the night prior, whatever it was. You know, he had like 26. And it's like, okay, well, he's going to come in. And like Ryan said, he's a scoring guard. Not that he plays the 2 position, but that's his play style, right? He's a scoring first guard. And that's totally fine. But then you have RJ Barrett, and it's like, well, where do we play him? Do you play Schroeder and Quickly and Barrett and force Barrett to play the 3 again? It's like, well, that was kind of his issue in New York. And I'm with you, Gary. Like, I'm a Duke fan, right? So I've watched a ton of RJ Barrett. I like RJ Barrett, the player. I wish he was better at the things that he's bad at, specifically playmaking, right? He's able to get to the rim at will, right? But his ability to dish the rock is not. It leaves a little bit to be, at least a little bit to be desired, right? So he's not necessarily a facilitator. He's not a great 3-point shooter. He does a lot of things well on a basketball court, but he doesn't do many things great, right? And that's something that you would wish that he would have grown more into in New York. They maybe could have gotten a higher haul for him if he had been on the block rather than like OG being on the block and him being forced into this trade. But he's such a high pedigree guy that I hope that in Toronto they're able to find a role for him, whether that's bumping Quickly to the bench like he was in New York and playing RJ Barrett at the 2. I don't know exactly how you're going to do it, but I don't necessarily love the RJ Barrett fit in Toronto. I said Detroit earlier, I think. I meant Toronto. But if they're able to kind of figure out a role for him to play where he doesn't have to be the main facilitator and he doesn't have to be the main scorer, I think that would probably be the best fit for him. But I don't necessarily love it in Toronto.
Yeah, I never loved the usage in New York, as you mentioned, them trying to kind of pigeonhole him into the 3. The Brunson signing, I think, is what truly necessitated that. They were kind of toying with it before the Brunson signing. Then they signed Brunson, and of course, they're trying to make room and move and get playing time for guys. And too many guards, as Ryan mentioned a moment ago. I always loved Barrett as a 2. I always thought that's where he projected in the NBA, all the way back to his days at Duke. The finishing at the rim is pretty confounding because he was pretty elite at Duke at doing that, right? Getting to the hoop and finishing at the hoop. Now, the NBA is a different animal. I get it. But, like, missing layups is not a thing that just starts happening when you're in the NBA. So I don't know what happened there. His shooting hasn't really improved either, which I thought was going to. I don't love the fit necessarily in Toronto if they're going to try to use him at the 3. And as you guys both mentioned already, they've been kind of giving Quickly run, alongside Schroeder and trying to figure out how that offense is going to work. Long term, are the Raptors going to move him again? Is he going to be on the move again? And if so, what's the destination, right? Like, I don't know. Not to put you guys on the spot, but do you think he's the long term in Toronto, or do we see he's going to be on the move again soon?
I think that hinges on what happens with Pascal Siakam, because Siakam is expensive and RJ Barrett's about to become expensive. I don't know that they want to be paying $60 million for both those guys combined, right? Whether it's moving RJ Barrett or moving Siakam. Siakam is the more coveted asset at this point, I believe, around the league than is RJ Barrett. So if you move Siakam, then you try to work with Barrett to find something in that roster and then that rotation that fits for him.
Yeah. Ryan, any dissenting opinion?
No, I think it's a good opportunity to get a look at him, right? To give him a fresh place. And Toronto is maybe a little more willing to try things with him than Tibbs and the Knicks are. Yeah. Tibbs isn't
exactly a universally historically flexible coach.
and RJ Barrett has been a consummate professional his entire career, has never shown like that the criticism is bothering him or anything like that, or that he knows he's struggling. He seems like a dedicated guy. Like I think this is a great opportunity where if he can't really flourish here in a system that I think is beneficial to him, they'll know pretty quick, and they'll be able to move on, whether that's just not re-sign him or package him, as part of a trade, because it is coming up where both Quickly and him are going to be like 60 mil combined, for what they want, and you can't do that. Like I think Siakam's probably gone at some point, but I don't think they want to pay 60 million for the current iteration of RJ Barrett. But if they get the flash RJ Barrett that we've seen, and I think all of us have been like, oh wow, that's finally what we all thought, even like all the way back, all the way back to high school. That's what we thought he was.
Yeah.
The best guy in his class. I think they give him a chance, whether it's like a year or a year and a half or whatever it happens to be. But just because I think the environment's better. But yeah, he definitely, like, if the deal's there, he could be gone too. That wouldn't shock me either. Toronto is a team that will trade literally anybody and entertain every trade offer that's asked of them.
Them and OKC are probably on the phone for every GM on speed dial.
Yeah, I mean, how many offers do you think they've had for Siakam in the last year and a half?
Plenty. Yeah, I think, Dad, I think that's what Ryan was getting at, right? I think they see the writing on the wall and they're trying to give themselves some roster flexibility, maybe upgrade, right? They probably perceive Anunoby as an upgrade. That's why they were willing to make the move. And then I think the Knicks are always in that perpetual state of when are we going to get a superstar that we can start pairing with these other players? I mean, they whiffed on Durant and I know they were in the LeBron sweepstakes and they were trying to make room for all that and blah, blah, blah. Someday maybe, right, we'll have superstars back in the Garden the way that we had in the 80s and 90s, right? And even before that, but the Ewing era especially. All right, well, let's shift gears a little bit. So Bleacher Report recently released what they called their 22 under 22. So it is their list of 22 players that they think are on the right trajectory, right, under the age of 22. They also have a couple of honorable mentions, so it's really like the 25 under 22. They kind of cheated a little bit, but they needed the headline, right, 22 under 22. So we've broken this down. We've got them kind of broke out here, and we're going to talk as we go through. What are some thoughts, right? What do you think about the players, where they've got them? Should they be higher, lower, on the list, off the list? And right out the gates, I kind of want to get your guys' thoughts. They've got the honorable mentions. They've got other guys that were considered. I didn't include them in our list. But I just want to kind of get your thoughts of the totality, maybe some guys that, not to spoil too much, but guys that didn't make the list that you thought should be on the list. We'll save that at the end after we get through all 22. Just keep that in mind if there's anybody you felt like was a snub or anything along those lines. So out the gates here, we've got 21 and 22, Anthony Black of the Orlando Magic. I know we've had some conversations about him and a little bit of difference of opinion, especially when we were doing our lead up to the draft. Benedict Mathurin, the all-name team, especially with Benedict Mathurin. And then our honorable mentions are Josh Giddey, Jeremy Sochan, Peyton Watson. Obviously, Giddey of the Thunder, Sochan with the Spurs, and Watson with the Nuggets. Sochan is probably in the all-hair team, him and maybe Kuzma. What are your thoughts here? 21, 22, any of the honorable mentions that should have been on maybe in place of one of these two, or do you feel comfortable with kind of where this list rounds out here? Go to Ryan first.
Well, if you look at the list, if you're saying someone needs to be on it, that means Mathurin has to go down, right? Like that's based off what the list is. And the methodology of this list, which me and Bentley actually talked about because we looked at this list previous, and we were wondering what the methodology was. Is it currently the best player? It is. If I'm starting a franchise, who am I taking? Like if this is a draft of, you can only draft guys that are currently under the age of 22, right? So I think that is interesting. I think I probably would take Josh Giddey over Benedict Mathurin just as a ceiling play. Purely as this is my first guy. Like if I have to start a franchise, I would prefer a guy who has the potential to be a lot of things, and probably also the potential to not be a serviceable NBA player because he never learns how to do anything else except for pass the ball and be tall. I even think Jeremy Sohan has the potential to be a better player than Benedict Mathurin. So I think both those guys have an argument to be on here. Peyton Watson, I think, is fairly not on the list, but I think he is right on the outside. I think that's fair. The guys they put in the also considered, I think Jordan Hawkins is reasonable, but he's not really a hub guy. You're probably not taking him as like a first round guy as like
he's a shooter for you.
But you play him on every team because he shoots from everywhere. He just doesn't do anything else. Moses Moody, a guy I like. AJ Griffin, a guy I like. There's some guys, but all those guys have significant flaws. Once you're down at that level, and I have no qualms with Mathurin being above those two guys that I mentioned, but I could see either of those being ahead of them.
Yeah,
thanks for correcting my pronunciation too. I hate when I mispronounce a name.
I think he has 5 pronunciations.
Yeah,
I've heard so many.
Don't mess with the Sohan. So
yeah.
Bentley, what do you think here as we round out the list?
Yeah, so I think there's a little slight bit of recency bias with this list coming out. I think that Bleacher Report may have forgotten the 2022 Golden State Warriors run to the NBA championship, wherein Moses Moody played critical minutes and had real impact on winning a championship against an incredibly talented Boston Celtics team. So to not have him actually on the list, even in the honorable mention, seems crazy to me. I would take Moses Moody over Jeremy Sohan, just given off of what I've seen from this year alone. Like Sohan, I understand that he's playing the wrong position, and that will come into play later in this list, right? Sohan is not a point guard in this league. Sohan is a wing who cannot shoot the ball. So, like, Moses Moody, a smaller wing than is Sohan, can shoot the ball and has scored real buckets in playoff games. I'm not saying that Sohan is a bad basketball player, right, by any stretch of the means, but I would personally have Moses Moody on this list, and I would have him in front of Benedict Mathurin. I probably would not have Mathurin in the top 22, personally. He showed a lot of spark and promise as a rookie, and then has lost playing time and kind of dropped further and further in the rotation.
His efficiency has not gone up.
Exactly. For a surging offense.
It was 150 a game.
Yeah, I mean, to me that does not show growth of potential, right? That shows diminishing potential. But that's the bone I had to pick at the top of the list. I also think that I understand Anthony. Nobody here is a bigger Anthony Black fan than I am, and you can go back and watch in the records books in our shows. Big Anthony Black guy.
Yep.
Just from what I've seen from the two of these players, I would take Giddey over Anthony Black. Currently, if I were starting a franchise right now, I know Giddey has not had a great year. Get it, understand there's a lot of off-court stuff. He's been inefficient on the court, totally get it. But I've seen the flashes. I know what he can do on a basketball court. And in a league that values flexibility and playmaking from your larger players, I would take the guy that I've seen do it on the basketball court before I would take the guy that I know cannot shoot the ball all that well. And I don't know yet whether he can do it or not, but I'm anticipating that he can, right? So I would bump Mathurin and Black back, and I would put Moses Moody and Josh Giddey on the list.
That's fair. Yeah, and I like you guys mentioned methodology. I breezed over it a little bit when I was reading their article because we all know like a lot of that can be maybe victim of the moment, flavor of the week, and they mentioned like this season's performance had a lot to do with it, yada yada. As you go through this list, if you're paying attention out there in viewer land, you'll see that like the names and then if you go back and read the article as well, like some of the descriptions of why they put players where they put them, it was clear that they didn't stick to their criteria as they went through the list either. So, leave that open to whatever interpretation you want when it comes to methodology. But I don't disagree with you, Bentley. The Mathurin thing is absolutely a stark, realization on him. Is this who he is? And is this who he's going to be his whole career? Because you mentioned it, right? That offense is surging. Tyrese Halliburton is becoming a superstar, maybe the best pure point guard in the NBA right now, right? There's an argument to be made. And Mathurin is still not struggling, but he's like treading water, it seems, within that offense. So everybody around him is getting better. He may not be. I appreciate him on my fantasy team because he does get volume when he gets an opportunity. But that's really where it ends with him. So yeah, I definitely understand both those perspectives for sure. All right, well, let's shift to numbers 11 through 20. So starting at 20, we have Jalen Green of the Houston Rockets. We have Dyson Daniels of the New Orleans Pelicans, Jonathan Kuminga of the Warriors, Cason Wallace of the Thunder, Jalen Duren, the uber athletic center for the Pistons, Derek Lively II, the uber athletic center for the Mavericks, Pods of the Warriors, Amen Thompson of the Rockets, Keontae George of the Jazz, and Jaden Ivey of the Pistons. Bentley, I'm going to go your way first this time. Talk me through what are your thoughts here, 11 through 20. Mix up the order, shake it up. Are there guys here that you would have maybe off the list or lower, guys you would take, below them that you would take over them? Talk to me.
Sure. I do have a few issues, right? I'm going to kind of go back to of the guys. I understand this is a potential thing. I get that. I think Kuminga is criminally low on this list. I think he should be a lot higher. He's another guy in that 2022 Warriors team that had real impact on them winning a championship. He's maybe one of the 5 most athletic guys in the NBA. He's shown that he can finish at the rim. He has some sort of shooting ability, right? It's tough when given the totality of this list to say that he's in the wrong spot, but I think that he should be in the teens, right? He's a player that I have written down in my notes that you should switch him and Pods. It's just they're on the same team. It's just the easiest thing to do, right? Now, if you read the article, there's a very fun fact about Pods that I'll give y'all. Averaging 15 points, 10 rebounds, 5 assists, and 2 steals per 100 possessions before turning 21. You got LaMelo Ball, Nikola Jokic, Tracy McGrady, and potentially Pods if he finishes this out for the rest of the season. That's extremely, extremely great company to keep, right? I like Pods a lot. I think he's fit in very well in the Golden State system. Steve Kerr obviously trusts him to come in and play real minutes and be a contributor on that team. It's hurting, I think, a little bit of the growth of some of the other younger guys that they don't play, like mix them in the rotation a little more, specifically Moses Moody, who I really like. But that's not that big a deal, right? Moses Moody, I think, can thrive playing with Steph or without Steph. Same with Pods, right? Not saying Pods should be off. I just think that he and Kuminga probably should be switched. It makes a little bit more sense in my mind. I would rather have Kuminga than I would, Pods. The other person on this list that I'd really pretty adamantly disagree about being where they are is Jaden Ivey. I don't know that Jaden Ivey has really shown me much of anything. He was this electrifying downhill scoring guard in college, and he really has not done that. Now, I understand being in Detroit, playing alongside Cade, they play a much slower pace. Jaden Ivey likes to get out and run. It's not necessarily the greatest fit for him there. And I get that, and I can't really hold that against him. But even in the games, and Cade has missed a lot of games so far, and Jaden Ivey, it's kind of like, well, I know we have some veteran guards, but like you're the rookie, you're the first year guy. Like, let's give you the ball. Let's do some things. He hasn't proven himself to be a winning player. I haven't seen a lot of growth from him. He hasn't really developed an outside shot, a mid-range deal. Like, he is still that downhill guard and can get to the rim at will, but it's just he hasn't shown me anything new since he got drafted. And it to me, again, that like the Sohan thing, that's not really a progression of potential, right? It's almost a regression that you've been in the league for 2 years. You're 22 or just under 22, I guess. And like, you're not seemingly getting a whole lot better. So I think deserves to be on the list. Got it. I think he should be much further back than where he is currently.
That's fair. Ryan, what do you think? 11 through 20 here.
I agree on the Jaden Ivey take. I won't add much more to it, but I do think that Ivey has not shown what some of the guys below him have already shown. And then I think there's guys below him that have higher potential than him. So I think under either methodology, I would have him lower. So And it seems like this is hypothetically a more potential-based one, and I think there's guys below him that I would move up. I also agree that I think Pods is too high. I think if you're starting a team, he does not go 14th of the guys under 22. I just don't see that, because what are teams going to do? They're going to look for hubs, right? Is he going to be a better offensive hubs? I mean, is he going to be a better NBA player than a lot of the guys that would go over him because of the potential that they're an offensive hub? Yes, of course, because not all of those guys will become offensive hubs, right? Jalen Green's at 20. He's still under 22. Like in 3 years, he could be a 25 point per game scorer. He could also be out of the league and like not playing. Like I believe that, right? Like he has a huge pendulum swing. So unless a team is just like, I guess if we're going to start if everyone in the NBA is wiped away,
I want steady Eddie.
And you're like, yeah, we want to be 500. You're taking him, right? Because it's like, we know what we're getting. I'm not saying his ceiling's not like he has some ceiling. He's still young. I just don't think it's great, right? He's not huge. He's only 6'4". Mm-hmm. He is not super athletic, not super quick, but does a lot of great things. You mentioned the stat about being in, Nikola Jokic and Tracy McGrady territory at his age. That's rare air, but it's also like, I think, a little bit of a red herring probably of like, is he comparable to that? Probably not. That's a guy I would have lower. I think Jalen Duren is criminally underrated and continues to be criminally underrated. He's been hurt this year, and that probably didn't help because he just came back. But if that guy can ever become like a slightly above average defensive center, he could be the best center in the league. Once the Jokic and Embiid start to tail off, like the best traditional center, what we think of as like a inside guy, right? I legitimately see that, especially offensively. He's already pretty good offensively. He just he needs to work out his defensive game. But I think he's underrated. I think even maybe Derek Lively could go up a little bit. Both those guys, I think, are underrated. Derek Lively, I would have Duren over Lively, and I said this to Bentley previously. I just think Duren is more likely to be a hub of a team, like either potentially the first best player or the second best player on a good team. I don't think Lively has that potential, but I could see Lively being like a great connector, similar to Pods, right? Yeah, I think Green is too low. Maybe there's bias there, but a guy who can score 20 points per game at his age, not on great efficiency yet, but can do it on a slow-paced team. I think you have to move him a little higher, right? That is still a valuable skill in the NBA. I know a lot of people are saying it's not, but I think it still is. It's still hard to score the ball. And then, again, my bias showing, I think Amen Thompson going from the argument that he was the second highest potential player in the draft. We heard that all the time, right? It was like, oh, it's Vic. And then if Amen reaches his, like, whatever his ceiling is, his hypothetical ceiling, he's the second best player in this draft, even over Scoot. That was said because of Amen's size and ability to handle the ball. Like if he ever becomes a okay shooter, and he could be an elite defender, an elite playmaker, all these things, right? Did that just go away? like if he's the second best player from this draft, how is there 12 guys, like second highest potential player? Like I understand Scoot being ahead of him. I understand Brandon Miller being ahead of him, but Keontae George, like, and I like Keontae George. Y'all heard me talk about that in the draft show. I thought Keontae George underperformed because of his ankle injury in college. He really struggled. He had like, his feet were really heavy apparently, but like, how is that guy above him? I know it's one spot, but I just don't understand how that happened in such a short amount of time. Keontae George has been okay, and Amen Thompson hasn't played, so I get that. But like, if he hasn't played, that means he hasn't shown much negative for you to drop him, right? So I don't understand that part of it. But I would have Ivy. I would drop Ivy and George and probably move him up potentially into the top 10, like into the 10 range. But again, maybe that's my bias showing.
No, and I think what it really shows is 11 through 20 is where I felt the most strongly about this, where it felt like they kind of vacillated between how they were projecting guys, right? It was, here's a guy who's done well this year, we're going to slot him in here, but here's a guy who hasn't played at all, we're going to still slot him in here, on potential and stuff. And like Amen, I feel like is a guy that like he could have been anywhere from 5 to 20 for me, right? Just because he hasn't played, right? We don't know what he is yet, right? We know what the ceiling projects to be, but if we're really talking about like using recency. He doesn't have a lot of recency to go there. So, like, I understand that portion if that's why they put him there. But Jaden Ivey, no, right? Like, that's the one that confounded me the most when I saw this list. And I didn't understand it. How do you have him at 11? Like, there's 5 guys in 11 through 20 that I think I would put over him, and maybe more than 5, right? He might even be like 21 or 22 for me in the end when, getting done with racking and stacking. But this list, from 11 to 20, it really felt like they didn't know exactly how they wanted to slot these guys in, and they had this like group of maybe say 8 through 21 that they like had in a pile, and they're just like, I like this guy's potential. I like this guy, what he's doing right now. And I think that's how Lively ends up over Jalen Duren, that sort of thing. And I think that's how Jaden Ivey must end up at 11, because I think they still think back to what he was at Purdue. And is Detroit ever going to use him properly? Spoiler alert, they're probably not. So maybe it's his next team that he gets used properly on, because Detroit is a plodding team. And they are still focused on whether or not Cade is going to be the answer for them long term in terms of their, hub, as Ryan has put it, of that team, that the focal point of that team. So, yeah, this from 11 to 20 really felt almost like a cobbled kind of like, how are you here and you here, and for sure. So I agree completely.
There was one that I forgot to mention, and as we were talking about it, I remembered. I would feel very comfortable switching Kason Wallace and Jaden Ivey in their spots. Kason Wallace, one, he's a Kentucky guard. We know that they drastically improve. Yeah, like that's all you got to say. He's a Kentucky guard, right? And similar to the two Warriors guys, not Potts, but Moody and Kuminga. It's like he's playing real minutes. He's an actual contributor. I don't think he's ever going to be a traditional like facilitator, run your immediate off, like he brings the ball up and initiates your offense, right? I'm not sure that's really his destiny in the NBA, but if he can continue to excel at being an absolute lights out shooter, a very good off ball cutter, a heady connecting kind of second pass kind of guy, the way that he's doing it in Oklahoma City right now, I think that he has serious upside there.
Yeah. Oh, that's fair. All right. One comment my dad brought up here, and we've talked a little bit about kind of the variability with players, but this question here, I think I want to bring it back to a term that, Bentley, you use this a lot, right? The pedigree. And I think it does depend a lot on that pedigree, right? If you're a top 5 pick, you're probably going to be given 3 years, maybe too long, right? If we're being honest about it, there's a lot of guys that have gone in maybe the top 5, top 8, that have been given a couple years too long in terms of teams waiting for them to come around. Understandably, you invest a lot of draft capital. That's a lot of draft capital to invest in a guy. But if you're a mid-first round, late first round, second round pick especially, right, you've got to really set the world on fire to make a difference as a second rounder. But if you're that mid to late first round guy, you're not going to get the same leash, right? Because you're probably one on a team that's now drafting in the lottery and they're going to draft your replacement. But also, you just don't have that pedigree, right? I like that term that you use a lot, Bentley, with describing some of these players. How long do you think is like the average that you think an NBA team would invest in? Let's say a lottery pick, right? Top 12, top, whatever the lottery ends up being by the time the NBA is done making playoff teams. Ryan, let's go your way first. What do you think is a fair and reasonable time we would expect an NBA team to give a lottery pick to develop and become that guy?
I think the NBA is the greatest professional league for people who are not qualified yet to play in that league.
Yeah.
As far as basketball goes, right? And not going to include the myriad of other sports that have similar things. But if you go play in the Spanish ACB, you are not playing. And you will not make the team. They will put you on the B team. They're like, it's like you're on JV in high school. It's like, you are not good enough. I don't care if you're the greatest prospect we've ever seen.
Right. I don't care where you're schooling this.
Yeah. Like, you are currently not good enough to play. The NBA has, and the reason why that happens, right, is because in Europe and Turkey and Israel and all these other Korea, all these places, right, they have relegation. And we've talked about that before. Yep. You get relegated if you finish typically bottom 2 or 3 in the league. Like, you are out of the league. It's like your team is no longer a part of this league.
Yep.
If the NBA did that, obviously these guys first of all, wouldn't play. They wouldn't get drafted at 19 years old to begin with. They'd get drafted. Everyone would stay in college for 4 years because that would be the only way they could guarantee to stay on a team in the NBA. It just wouldn't happen. But because there is no incentive to compete when you're not good, right? There's not an incentive. There's outside of like winning feels good for like young players, but like there's not an incentive. They can give guys 5 years, like over what if you have the draft capital to do that, you lose nothing. Right? Yeah, you lose nothing except for ticket sales, which like are ticket sales like a huge like income for them? Like, yeah, but not like the biggest.
Dollars or much more.
Yeah, especially if you do this in the middle of a TV deal where you don't have to worry about it for like 10 years. It's like, for a decade we're getting, we're getting 70 million a year. Like we don't even have to compete. Like, it is the best league to not be qualified to play it. And that's a good thing. Like, I think I'll just say philosophically as a fan, right? I've had to deal with this over the last couple of years, being a Houston fan, and we've come to love these players and we're really attached to them, right? It's like, hey, I want this guy to become great because I like this like 19-year-old, because we all remember what it was like to be that and to like, not to say innocent, but like nothing in the world affects you. Like you're good. And I think that's good for the fans to experience that. No other league has that, and I think that's a benefit. Can you ban that guy first of all?
That's a pretty guns up comment there.
So real quick before we get to Bentley's response to this, for anybody who doesn't watch the show, Ted Lasso, he's a soccer coach from America that goes over to England and coaches a Premier League team, and they're talking to him about like relegation, right? And he's like, we don't have that in America. Relegation, you get moved from like one league down to another league, and you lose, especially if you're going from like the top league to that next tier, you lose like 80% of your revenue that's shared across the league, right? It's like the collective bargaining agreements that teams have in professional leagues in America, but the numbers decline rapidly when you get relegated. So teams break up, you lose talent, it's hard to get back into that top tier league. So as Ryan was saying, like you can't just play these prospects because you think they've got a ceiling, because you're going to end up losing all of your money, right? And they asked Ted, well, what do you do in America when your team sucks? And he's like, you just suck and nobody watches and you just draft high and stuff like that. He's like, yeah, and they're like, well, that's no fun. And he's like, yeah, we don't mind it in America apparently. So. Bentley, on you, man. What do you think? Any other thoughts here on developing players in the NBA?
Yeah, I think the best answer I could come up with is 3.5 seasons. After the 3.5 season mark, they have to make a decision whether to give you the max rookie extension, because nobody gives anything less than the max rookie extension anymore. They either give you the max rookie or they trade you, or you become a free agent. Like that. That's just how that works, right? So I think the most accurate answer I could say is 3.5 seasons, right? So you draft a 19-year-old. He's 22 and a half or coming up on 22, whatever, in the 22, 23-year-old range. We know that in the NBA, peak years start at like 26-ish, 26, 27, 28, 29, that kind of 4-year range. Well, yeah, unless you're Luka, who'd been a pro since he was 15. So they have those first 3.5 seasons to determine whether or not you are going to hit a peak worthy of being a $60 million player, a $45 million player, whatever, right? So to fully develop in the NBA, it takes, we'll say, 6 full seasons, 5 full seasons. But it takes 3.5 years for you to prove to a franchise, if you're a lottery pick, that you have what it takes to continue along that trajectory, right? And that's hoping that you get that second contract and continue to develop, right? We've seen guys get that second contract and they don't make that next step, right? It guns up. It's been kind of the knock against Jaylen Brown this year, right? Like Jaylen Brown, he's obviously playing on a super talented team. They don't need him to be the guy. But if they had gone through some of these trades that have been floated in the offseason, right? You give him the most expensive contract in the NBA. He's entering his peak. You hope that he takes another step forward and becomes the first, second team All-NBA guy that carries the team to a franchise, right? It doesn't seem that he's taking that step. Once again, it's fine. He doesn't have to. He's not in a position where that's needed. But Boston evaluated him over the first 4 years of his contract, gave him, or 3.5 years, whatever, gave him the rookie max, and then he made an All-NBA team, and now he got the super max, right? So they used that initial progression evaluation period to decide whether he was going to, quote, develop into a player that deserved that, and he proved to them that he did. So that's kind of the timeline that I judge it by. 3.5 years, you get the rookie max, and then after 2 years, you're eligible for the super, right? So it's like it's almost broken down into sections there in my mind. That's how I see it.
Yeah, excellent. Good answers. I have no dissenting thoughts on that. I think those timelines make sense, and yeah, I think some teams are willing to stretch that timeline more, for sure. All right, well, moving onward, we are at the 6 through 10 grouping here, and for a couple of the people on this show, number 10 has shown a lot of promise. Bilal Coulibaly. As jaded Wizards fans, Bentley and I know personally I've been pleasantly surprised by his play. His ability to shoot the ball, especially, has been a nice piece there for a guy that's already pretty highly skilled defensively and can rebound well. Ausar Thompson has shown how athletically gifted he is. He's averaging like 45 rebounds a night as a 6'7" forward, which is a number that's pretty unheard of. Brandon Miller at 8. Ryan, I'm curious. You talked about where they projected and kind of where they're on this list. Curious to hear your thoughts on him. Shaedon Sharpe for the Blazers, and we round out 6 through 10 with Jabari Smith of the Houston Rockets. So, Ryan, I'm going to go your way first because I think there's some interesting names on this list here, 6 through 10, that I think you're going to have some nice insights for.
Yeah, I think you already kind of know how I feel about Brandon Miller. I like Brandon Miller. I don't have like a huge issue with him. I just think like if you're starting a team, like why are you taking the high floor guy? Like I don't really understand that when there's higher ceiling guys, that have shown flashes already. Like it's not like these are guys that haven't shown anything, right? Like Coulibaly, I probably take him over Brandon Miller right now. Like assuming everything else is equal, I probably would, just because the potential of a star is so much higher than Brandon Miller. I don't think Brandon Miller's ever a 1A guy like it says on here. I just don't, I don't see that. He maybe is a great connective piece, but like I don't see the star. So I would probably move him down just a little bit. Like he's at 8, so it's not like terrible, but he'd probably fall out of the top 10, moving like an Amen Thompson or those types of guys up a little bit. I think Ausar Thompson's in a good spot. I think that makes sense. He's shown more than Amen has, so I don't think you can put him ahead of him. But they're probably very similar, just because they're twins and they have similar athletic profiles and have played similar amounts of basketball. Like Ausar is just on a team that has had the ability to give him a lot more playing time.
He's been healthy too.
Yeah, and he's been healthy, and that team's not good. So it's like, let's see what we can get out of Ausar Thompson, which I respect that. That's fine. Coulibaly, kind of similar, right? Like he's a guy who's been a super fast riser, and so I think people are still trying to kind of wrap their head around him because he's just so young and came out of nowhere in the draft cycle, kind of. But I probably have him.
Ran to Victor Wembanyama.
Yeah, but like blew up at the end of the year, which is which is crazy. I would probably bring Brandon Miller down, like I said. I think Shaedon Sharpe is fine. I just don't know what else he does outside of scoring the ball, and that's a concern because there's guys on here that are also good at scoring the ball at about the same rate as him, and they're like 10 spots lower. So, like, I respect this purely in a vacuum that I think scoring is important, and I think he has the potential to develop another skill that will make him a serviceable player and potentially a star, right? If he can develop some playmaking ability, some maybe like stop a guy every now and then, something like that. And he seems like he should, but I was always concerned about his defense because he's kind of tight in the hips. If you ever watch him play, he's not like super loose. So I worry about that on the defensive end, obviously, how he can move his hips around. But yeah, so based off this methodology, I don't love Sharp. I like Sharp there personally because I think if a team was drafting, that's probably about where he would go. I think he's a top 10 guy. I just don't love the methodology because how is a guy like Benedict Mathurin so much lower than him? I know Mathurin hasn't shown as much, but like similar archetype
Almost
of guy.
the same player. Yeah.
Jalen Green, like how is Jalen Green at 20 and Sharp's at 7? Like that.
Yeah.
Jalen Green is about the same efficiency, slightly smaller, but averaging more points a game. Like they have the same exact problems. Jalen Green's probably currently a better playmaker and defender than Shaden Sharp is. Like I just find that weird. And then Jabari Smith Jr., I think that's fine. I think he's similar to Brandon Miller, where I think he has slightly higher star upside. I think he's shown slightly more, but he also has more experience. So Brandon Miller could look like this next year. And Jabari Smith's just bigger, right? If you get a 4 who can be a legitimate shot maker from 3, a 6'10" guy, 6'11" guy who can make threes, handle the ball a little bit, block shots, rebound, like that's a super valuable player. Again, do I think he's a 1A guy? Probably not. He's probably in the Brandon Miller 2 spot, but he's probably a better 2 than Brandon Miller. So I would actually move him down a little bit, as much as it hurts me to say that, just because I would be taking as many potential 1 guys as I could in the first top 10 picks, personally.
Yeah. Yeah, I think with Shaden Sharp, what I would really like to see is anybody who's a degen like me, I'd like to see his over-under on assists higher than 2.5 on DraftKings, which is about what it is every night. A guy that has the ball as much as he does, right? Not to say that scoring guards should always look to become playmakers, but he has the ball all the time in that offense, right? Quite a bit in that offense. Even with Scoot on the floor, Scoot's not, there's not a one guy who's going to be handling the ball, a ball dominant point guard in that offense. Shaden Sharp has the ball in his hands a lot, and to not be at least showing any semblance of playmaking ability is definitely a concern for sure. Bentley, what are your thoughts here, 6 through 10?
Yeah, I agree with most of what Ryan said. Taking as many guys inside the top 10 as you can get your hands on that you project to be 1A guys on a championship squad. The Thompson twins, I would probably flip-flop them. I would put Asar back into the, 11 through 15 or whatever we did.
Yeah, 11. Yeah. Ahmed's at 13. So
yeah. So I would probably flip-flop them. I think Ahmed's been better. And like Ryan laid out for us, he was projected to potentially be the second best player in this draft coming in, right? So I'm not sure that Asar he's played more, I guess, in the NBA. So that's what they're basing this off of. I think Ahmed is the better player currently and has potential to be the better player down the road. Not to say that Asar is not good. He's been a rebounding machine in Detroit. And from the wing position, that's pretty valuable skill. I really like Brandon Miller. I might have him above Jabari Smith Jr. Jabari might have, I know not to discredit Ryan or his Houston Rockets. I like Jabari Smith Jr. a lot too, but I was just a big Brandon Miller guy in college, especially, and then coming out in the draft. I enjoy Shaden Sharp. He's a lot of fun, but like you said, Gary, he has the ball so much and he doesn't do a whole lot with it other than score. It's sure the scoring upside and the athletic upside is all there, and I get why they have him where they have him, but if he could do a few more things to kind of create offense for others around him, I would feel a little bit better about him running the show. Obviously he has another guard there, 2 other guards in Anthony Simons and Scoot that responsibility may fall upon.
Even Kobe averaged 5 for his career.
Yeah, you got to do some passing, bro.
And Kobe famously hated all of his teammates.
Yeah, yeah, true. Bilal, I like Bilal. You can go back and listen. I was not a fan of the draft pick. I was pretty low on him. Now all I can think about is how Giannis looked at 19 years old, and maybe hope that we have a Giannis who's not as tall but trades that for being a sharpshooter.
Yeah,
if if he develops to like 2/3 of what Giannis is, I'll be happy with that. Because he already is a better shooter than Giannis ever has been or ever will be.
Yep.
And he's a ferocious defender, right? He's only going to continue to get stronger and faster as he develops in the league and gets older. That just comes with age. So I'm super excited about it. I like that they have him in the top 10. I think that's probably an accurate position for him. If you want to move him 1 or 2 spots, right, then it kind of messes with you got to move everybody, or you can't double slot. That's not how that works. So I'm cool with him being at 10.
No 8A and 8B.
Yeah, like that's just not how numbers. As a numbers guy myself, that's not how the numbers work. But I appreciate that they have him in the top 10. I'm a fan of that. Yeah. I didn't really have a ton. I know I spoke a lot. I said a lot of words, but I was really other than flipping the Thompson twins, I didn't really have any serious notes for this section. I kind of think that those guys all should be slotted within that range.
Yeah, I like the group here that's 6 through 10, and personally, Amin, I don't know that I would have had him higher than 10. I don't think I would have him over Asar right now, just because of what I've seen on the floor from Asar. Not only is he averaging 10 rebounds a game, he's also the number 1 player 6'7" and under in terms of blocks per 36. So that's, for me, what he brings to the floor. I'm going to leave him kind of. I think he's in a good spot there. In terms of where he's at. Bilal, I might put a little over him. Maybe I move Bilal to 8, but then again, as you said, you got to kind of shift things. Maybe, is it Brandon Miller slides back even more, possibly. I didn't really go through and re-slot everything. I more kind of had general idea of I'd move him up and maybe him back, and I probably have guys double slotted, right? But that's the luxury we have when we don't actually put a number on it, right?
Yep.
But I love what I've seen from Bilal. I'm going to dote on him a little bit. I was really questioning whether he was going to become a jump shooter. I slotted him to the Pacers in our mock draft, which ended up being the pick, but not the team, because he got traded on draft day. I thought he was going to always be a defensive stud and potentially a mid-range, little bit of back to the basket slashing kind of guy. Give you a little bit of varied offense, but inside the arc. He's been a much better, especially from the 3-point line. He's been a much better shooter than I anticipated him being. He's hitting step back threes with the ball in his hands. If that's who he's going to be long-term offensively, like you said, Bentley, sky's kind of the limit with him. I don't think he's ever quite right. Giannis is the guy you always kind of think of when you have these guys that are, Bambi, right? They're long and athletic and trying to figure out their body and growing into it. I don't know that he's ever going to reach that, right? Like that supernova level, but damn, man, if he can shoot and play defense the way he plays it and rebound the ball as well as he rebounds the ball, he's got a nose for the ball when it comes off the rim. I'm excited. I know the Wizards are in the midst of figuring out what the rebuild looks like, but if that guy's part of that rebuild, I think we're in pretty good shape, right? If we can start building around that guy, I think we're in pretty good shape.
Yep.
Always getting faster and stronger.
I don't know that he was here for the section where I laid out what the timetable was for development, but I said that prime was 26, 27, 28, 29. 26, 27, 28.
He's the exception. He's the exception.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Prime.
But with his level of income and modern medicine,
that is true. That is true. I did not take that into account.
He can live 200-300 years.
Easy.
His peak is at 86.
That's fair. 86 to 125.
Prime B.
A1
right,
West Texas Wagyu.
Yeah, that Texas. The time has come. Here's our top 5. 22 under 22 at number 5, Scoot Henderson, the number 2 pick in the draft this past year. Alperen Şengün, who's been an absolute godsend for the Rockets. Paolo Banchero of the Magic. Chet Holmgren of the Thunder. And the other favorite for Rookie of the Year, along with Chet Holmgren as it stands currently, Victor Wembanyama, the meteorite from France, the number 1 pick to the Spurs, the number 1 prospect we've seen in quite some time. So Bentley, going to go your way first. 1 through 5. How do you feel about this part of the list?
Well, you missed one accolade when talking about Wemby there. He was actually the second best France prospect to be drafted this season.
Yes. Number
Behind
2 from
Bilal.
France.
Yes.
Behind Cooley.
So this is the portion of the show where my bias comes out strongly. I think that you guys probably could have assumed that this was going to happen when you saw who was slotted at number 3. Coming off a double overtime 43-point showing where his second best player was injured in the game, and still Paolo Banchero scored the last 18 points for the Orlando Magic. I think that he should be number 1 on this list. I think that Chet Holmgren should be number 2 on this list. And I think Wemby should be number 3 on this list. Had Wembanyama been drafted to Oklahoma City, I think he may have had a chance to be number 1 on this list. We talked about this last week or the week prior, maybe, where being drafted to the right situation matters a lot. This is the part of the show where Jeremy Sohan comes back into play. And Pop has been playing Sohan at the point guard, which makes absolutely no sense and is just doing nothing but hurting Wemby. Not having someone that can throw him. Pop not playing the point guard on that roster that is able to throw entry passes into the post. One Jones, the Trey Jones, not playing him full-time at point guard makes absolutely no sense to me. I'm not sure what exactly Pop is trying to do there in San Antonio. I'm not the first person to say this. I think everybody else here has said this. National media people have said this. It doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know why they're doing it. So for that reason, I'm putting Wemby at 3. Chet should be at 2. Paolo is, at this point in his career, is so far advanced to those other 2 guys. Like he made an all-star team. You know? And he's under 22. He's 21. I looked it up. He's 21 years. How is he not number 1? He's one of the 25 best players in the NBA already, right now. I don't understand how he's not number 1 on this list. Alpi has, you said it, a godsend to Houston. That boy is so much fun to watch. He couldn't jump over a phone book if you put it flat on the ground, but boy, is he fun to watch. He makes the right plays every single time. He's an above-average defender because of his positioning and his ability to play passing lanes. And then Scoot Henderson was the number 2 draft pick for a reason. His potential, we said it during the pre-draft show, his potential is basically limitless, except for what size limitations he has, right? So I think and he had some injuries early on in the year, but he's played pretty well since he came back. So I don't think you can knock him too much for that, right? Like Ryan said with Amen, like if he was so highly rated coming in, but he's played not as much, I don't think you can hold that against him from the potential we talked about over the summer, right? So I'm okay with Scoot being there because of the meteorite that you said Wemby is, because of the ascension of Alpi, because of the way that Chet Holmgren has been playing. He's going to win Rookie of the Year. And then Paolo's an all-star and one of the 25 best players in the league.
Yeah. I agree with you. I'm happy you said it, and I can just kind of piggyback on what you said, because if I'm starting an NBA franchise right now and I've got to pick one of these guys under 22, maybe I'm hard-pressed not to continue to say that Wemby's still got that fucking rocket ship potential. But, man, Paolo's so fucking good, and he's already showing how good he is. And he can be the guy who can take a team and lead a team. He's clearly starting to become that locker room guy there in Orlando, improving his efficiency in a lot of ways, but also being able to do just a lot of things. He fills the stat sheet. He's a willing rebounder, a very capable rebounder, but also a willing rebounder. He will go in there and stick his nose in there. He's been busted up in the face a couple of times to show that he's willing to go in there amongst the trees. I think in a vacuum right now, I think I'm Paolo 1. I might have Wemby 2, splitting hairs with Chet Holmgren. They're kind of 2A and 2B. I know we can't do that, but probably take Wemby only because I think I've seen Chet a little more because he was on TV in America in college, and he's been in the league now. I've seen 2 springs with him and whatnot. So I'm probably going to take the unknown still with Wemby a little bit. And also, I'm confident, I think, that eventually, Pop has started moving Sohan away from the point guard a little bit. I think long term, Pop's going to figure out that like he needs Tim Duncan's Tony Parker with Victor Wembanyama. So I'll leave those two in the order that they are. But I agree with you. Paolo for me is right now the number one option to build a team for players under 21 for sure. And Scoot, if he got bumped out of the top 5, I don't think I'd be mad. There's a couple of guys in the 6 through 10 range that I think so far this season have shown some of what they're capable of. And Scoot's been hurt. If that was the reason we wanted to move them around, I think I could be okay with that. But man, Al's been awesome. I'm gonna get off my soapbox now though and let Ryan rebut because I know he's not gonna like that we have Paolo at 1.
Nope.
I don't hate it. It's not like the worst take I've ever heard. I do disagree. I would have Vic number 1. Paolo I think is much closer to a finished product, which is a good thing. Like that's not a criticism of him. He's an all-star caliber, potentially all NBA caliber 4, right? Like obviously you can't be mad about that. But Vic is like a mystery box.
Yes.
He could be anything, even Paolo Banchero.
He will never be a 6-month student graduate, okay?
It's like, will you take Paolo Banchero or this mystery box? I've taken the mystery box. Could even be Paolo Banchero. It's the Family Guy meme.
Yeah,
that
could be a boat.
yeah. Do you take this boat?
So why don't we just take the boat?
Yeah, exactly. No, I think Vic. The edge for me is he's already probably the best defender of everyone on this list. The most impactful defender. Best is probably not the right way to say it, but impactful because of what he does, size and contesting shots and stuff. If he becomes close to Paolo offensively, he's a more valuable player, and would be superstar level, right? If he's close to Paolo offensively ever, it'll be a different type of offensive game, right? I don't ever think Vic and Paolo are going to look super similar. Vic would have to put on some weight, but a lot of weight. But yeah, I have to take Vic. I just think
fill out that frame.
Yeah, he'd be 350 if he wanted to look like Paolo. I think it's just so hard for me not to take him, right? I think in the first year of this draft, the team that takes Paolo is probably the favorite to win the league that year, right? If you're starting these teams, and it's like, okay, Paolo's the best player currently on this list. I think that is true. I don't think he's the highest potential guy. I think his potential has been higher than I expected it to be, because I was concerned with some of his athletic limitations, because he's not always the quickest or bounciest guy in the world, but he doesn't necessarily need to because of his natural size and his ability to use his body really well. But I still would take Vic. So my draft starts at 2, right? That's really where I think the conversation happens. And I think taking Chet or Paolo is fine. I would probably take Paolo at 2. So I'd probably take Chet at 3. And Bentley probably remembers, but I said I would take Chet at number 1 in that draft. That was my initial thought. I haven't seen enough of Chet to know. And Chet's also a little older. A lot of people don't. He's about Paolo's age, I believe. I believe they're pretty.
Yeah, when you miss your rookie year, right?
Yeah, and he was an older freshman. He was he was 19 already as a freshman. Yeah. They're the same age, but as far as age trajectory goes, they're pretty similar. So I would probably have Chet just below. Also, he's in the perfect situation, so he looks really good, and he's been good by himself too. I think the advanced metrics show that he's good without Shea and these other guys too. So I'm not going to hate on him too much for that, but I think Paolo has shown the thing that I said I value most, which is getting the superstar guy, and I think Paolo has the potential to actually be that superstar. And then Şengün, I agree with right after that. I think that makes the most sense. He's one of the few hubs on this list that currently is one. It's him and Paolo. That's, I think, the list. and Şengün is the best player on a playoff team right now, just like Paolo is, like a team in the playoff race. So how is he not in the top 5? I think he has to be like where he is. And I think
that he's at number 4 on a team that could be a top 4 team in the West.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Another team?
And he legitimately could be, the second best player at the end of this list career. Like that wouldn't surprise me if it's like Paolo, Şengün, because
he's
Vic,
got a skill set that doesn't necessarily diminish, right?
Yep. And we already know what we have with him, right? Chet, we know too, but there's already injury concerns with him a little bit. And Vic, we don't know, right? Like we don't know what that turns out to be. Probably better, but we don't know.
It's an advantage of playing below the rim.
Yeah. I mean, you don't get hurt that much. you don't get your body thrown all over the place. And then Scoot, I would have Scoot at 5. I had him at number 2 in that draft right after Vic, and I think I still have some concerns with him. He's not a good at the rim finisher, which for a guy who gets to the rim, he's got the RJ Barrett problem. He had that issue in the G League too, which is not good because the NBA is even harder to score at the rim. He can get there, but he just doesn't finish as well as I would like, and I hope that improves because his body, similar to RJ Barrett, it seems like he would be able to separate enough to get there, right? Just like RJ Barrett. But again, RJ Barrett doesn't do it, right? And RJ Barrett's bigger and still is not able to do it. So that's a concern I have. Shooting's still a concern, but he's starting to look better shooting the ball. And he's just been hurt. So I think keeping him at 5 is fine. But I think the other – there at the top 4, there's 2 established players who are below the potential players. And I think, like I said, Paolo is the best player on this list. Whoever drafts him has the best player in the league at that point, right? If we're starting these teams. Şengün is the second best player on this list currently, and they have the second best team. So I have no problem with where they are. If you want the potential of Vic and Chet, you take them above. But I would probably, like I said, Vic, Paolo, and then probably Chet and Şengün probably in the same ballpark as well. So that's probably where I am.
Yeah. Any further thoughts, Bentley? Anything Ryan said not sit with you well?
Well,
he's about to pull his notebook out.
Yeah, wait a minute here.
How far back are we going?
Yeah, I just want to. I was on Paolo being the first overall pick in the draft where Chet was him, Chet and Jabari, obviously. So I obviously am a Paolo Banchero fan, so I think he should be 1. I like that Ryan admitted that he should at least be 2 on this list. I think the importance of being drafted into the right situation cannot be stated enough. Chet, obviously, in the perfect situation, like Ryan said. I think that if you put Wemby, Chet, or Şengün in Chet Holmgren's position right now, any 3 of those guys could have a case to be number 1 on this list, just because of they will have shown the most, right? Because they have the opportunity to show the most. Where Şengün has probably shown the most with the least talent around him, right? I don't want to say opportunity because he's starting playing a bunch of minutes. He has the ball a lot. So he has a lot of opportunity, but he has probably the least talented roster around him, if I could say, well, other than Wemby. He probably has to do the most with the least, right? And he is.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So real quick before we get to our customary Thursday tradition that we're going to change up a little bit this week, we talked a little bit about some snubs that you guys thought. Bentley mentioned Moody. So I want to give you an opportunity. Your one name that's not on this list that you would have put on this list that you would go to bat for to put on this list. Say we're gonna drop Benedict Mathurin off, right? Off 22. Who's the guy that's going in at 22? You've got one guy that you can lobby for. Ryan, going to go your way first.
Oh, that's tough. One guy I would lobby for. Probably Walker Kessler would probably be. I think he's 21, I believe. Probably be a guy I would throw on the list. Yeah, that's the guy that comes to mind off the top of my head. I think Keegan Murray's too old.
He's 22.
Kessler's 22. Oh God, ancient. Uh, let me think. Jalen Williams, just turned 22. Most of these guys I think are 22. LaMelo Ball's 22 now. All these guys are 22. Scotty Barnes is 22. It's like everybody I would put on this list is like
just off the list.
Franz Wagner is 22. Like there's a lot of really good people who are 22. I'm learning. There's a lot of talent. Evan Mobley's 22.
Yeah.
Anthony Edwards, I believe, is like 22.
Yeah, might be 23, but yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, any of those guys to go on the under 22 list, they could go anywhere. I can't think of really anybody off the top of my head that I would love.
Cam Thomas is 22.
Yeah, it's just so many guys are already there is the problem. Let me think about it. If Bentley has one, I'll think about it.
All right.
I've looked up like 7. Yeah, it's going to be Moody because I've looked up 7 guys and they're all 22.
Fair enough.
Wait.
All right. Ryan, if you think of it, you can talk to us after the Thursday tradition, but we are going to change it up a little bit this week. So we do not have a Thursday game. So for those that have tuned in and those that haven't, every Thursday we make our picks in the Thursday night game so far this season. I think Ryan has had a pretty good track record. I don't think I have, but we're changing it up this week. So maybe I'll have a little better success here. So we're going to go with the Saturday night game because it is a winning in, losing out playoff game. So the Texans are playing the Colts. Both teams are currently 9-7. Both teams have an opportunity to win their division as well if the Jaguars were to lose. The Jaguars hold the tiebreaker right now. But the winner gets in the playoffs. The loser is going home. All right? So right now, ESPN has the line Houston minus 1.5. Now, important to point out that Texans are on the road playing in the Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis. Over-under is 47.5. I think that line is pretty decent considering these two teams, but Houston is favored, minus 1.5. Ryan, I'm going to save you for last because it's your hometown team. Bentley, what are your thoughts on this game? Houston, or are you going with the underdog at home?
I'm going to take Houston. They had an extremely impressive defensive performance last week that almost cost me a fantasy football championship. However, you are in the presence of a 2-time back-to-back fantasy football champion, so whatever, AMA, I'll do that later. You heard that right, by the way. 2-time back-to-back fantasy football champion.
Yeah.
No, I'm going to go Houston. CJ Stroud is playing. Their defense has been lights out recently. I like what Shane Steichen and Indianapolis has been doing all year long. They have been an incredible story. Gardner Minshew has gotten those guys going in the right direction.
I don't know who it is, but I appreciate it.
Gardner Minshew has an offense humming typically. That being said, Will Anderson was worth the trade back up into the top 3. He had 2 sacks last week. I believe he was AFC Defensive Player of the Week, I think. I just really like what they have going in Houston. My good friend Ryan is a fan of the team, so I root for them, because I root for him. He needs a lot of help, so I tend to lend my love that way. I was super high on CJ Stroud. I said he was my favorite quarterback coming out of the draft last year. I've been vindicated. He's looked incredible.
Oh, yeah.
They have weapons. They're not like great weapons, but he's the tide that rises all boats, right? So he has that offense humming. That defense is playing very well. It's a high pressure situation. I think that they go in and get it done.
All right. Yeah, UB product, Jarrett Patterson, back on the roster as well in Washington.
Yeah.
All right, Ryan, what are your thoughts? Houston or Indy?
I guess I have to say Houston, right? I mean, it's like a requirement. If this was a surprise season, I think for us. CJ looked a lot better right away, which I think that maybe not shocking to everybody, but shocking to a lot of people. I think, especially he looked so much better than Bryce Young,
Yeah.
who I think was a expected to be significantly better. Like I didn't hear a lot of people saying CJ was better. There wasn't a lot of talk of him at number one for sure. So there's my little quarterback history lesson there. Yeah, I think I have to take Houston. It's -1.5, right? I would probably take Houston -1.5. And I would feel okay about it. I don't feel amazing because I think Indy's got a good team. Gardner Minshew, he can randomly throw out like a spread offense capability again that he showed the first like 6 games of his like professional career.
Yeah, Minshew mania,
and then broke off. So I think Houston's got some injury issues on the defense a little bit, which is a concern. I think it'll be a close game. I think that line is not terrible. I would expect like a 3 to 5 point game somewhere. But I have to take Houston, win and get in, and then all the way to the moon. Obviously, after that,
to the moon, diamond hands in the playoffs. Yeah, I'm with you guys. Give me Houston. Probably a field goal, right? I think that defense is great. If it wasn't for the Browns winning 11, possibly 12 games here, D'Amico Ryans probably wins Coach of the Year. I think Kevin Stefanski is probably going to win it because of all of the things that Cleveland has had to overcome in the process, losing Chubb and losing their starting quarterback and being on their 5th quarterback, and Joe Flacco looking elite. 4th, okay. Joe Flacco looking elite again in his old age. Otherwise, I think D'Amico Ryans probably would win Coach of the Year. Shane Steichen, I think, would be in consideration as well because of the job he's done with Indianapolis. And if you ask any Philly fan, they probably miss him a lot because that offense looks pretty bad without him. And Indianapolis is scoring points with far less weapons than Philadelphia is. So, yeah, stronger and faster.
Still developing.
Strong center play, right? They got a pretty good offensive line, right? But yeah, give me CJ Stroud. Man, I think if the Panthers had a chance to do over, I think they would take CJ Stroud instead of Bryce Young. I think there were some people clamoring for that. I think there were a lot more people thinking Bryce Young was the right pick. And clearly Carolina thought that. But yeah, give me Houston in this winning in 23-20 maybe. Give me a field goal game. I know that doesn't hit the over for you D-gens out there, so take that with whatever number of grains of salt you need to. But yeah, that's what I meant. So we're all on Houston, so I guess go ahead and bet the other side.
Go the other way.
Oh,
I have a player for you.
Yes.
Miami Heat, Nikola Jovic.
Yeah, he's one.
He's a 21-year-old guy who is 6'10", 240. Pretty athletic, very savvy when he does get to play. I remember talking about him with y'all during Summer League when he was playing very well.
Yep.
And then he plays 6 minutes a game.
Yeah.
It's like, all right.
Yeah, that's Miami for you. I was gonna say Jarris Walker is probably a guy I would consider too. I was a lot high. I think a lot of people have like given up on Jarris Walker, like because he hasn't played.
Yeah,
he's played 10 games and been in the G League, but I think Jarris Walker has the potential to be a like 3rd best guy in a championship team, which is pretty good. He's got the body type for it. And I think he's a good fit in Indiana. The problem I have with Indiana right now is they really need like a physical guy to play the 4 to like help out. If they have that guy and they just like don't play him. So I don't know why they don't, but he's a guy I would consider on that list too. He's probably just outside of it. Just but I liked him a lot more than he was the 8th pick. And I think everybody above him is on that list. All 7 guys above him are on the list. So he would be the next guy probably.
Nice. I like it. Bentley, you said you had a question.
I do. I do. I'm gonna put you guys in the spot here a little bit.
Right.
So, very recently in the NBA, we've seen the ascension of 2 basketball players. Obviously,
Kai Jones.
Yeah. Yes. No, these are 2 players who have been good players throughout their career, but have really taken a step. These are both players that are on their 2nd team in the NBA, and they're probably 2 guys that are vying for the 2 first-team NBA spots to fill what used to be the guard positions. So going forward, starting a roster, you have to start with the point guard position. Would you rather have Tyrese Halliburton or Shai Gilgeous-Alexander? Gary, you go first. You tell me, and then Ryan, you tell me.
I'm taking Halliburton, man. I feel like he is like the he's the guy I know I can run my offense through and count on him to make the right decision. Shai's a bit more score first. I think he is a good playmaker, but I like what Halliburton can do as a guy who can dominate the ball, get me in the right offense, get me out of bad plays, make the right decisions, make the right play. And he has become just unbelievable since leaving Sacramento. It's not often that we run into these trades where both sides win the trade, but Sacramento, they made room for De'Aaron Fox to become what De'Aaron Fox is now, and Halliburton went to Indiana and became what Halliburton is now. Everybody made out in that trade, right? And that doesn't happen very often, but give me the guy who's 25 and 20, it seems like, every night. He's been just tremendous on an offense that's scoring a ton. He's really the engine that makes it go. So for those reasons, I'm going to take Halliburton.
Cool. Ryan?
Yeah, I would take SGA. I like the defensive potential better. I think he's just a better 2-way guy currently, and I think it's really close though.
Yeah.
It depends on what is your like preference on like how you build a team, because they are different players even though they play the same position. I like Shai's size, and I mean, both amazing playmakers. I just think Shai does enough defensively, and I think scores in different ways, right? Like Halliburton, obviously an elite 3-point shooter, but Shai is able to attack parts of the floor that I think are really valuable, especially the playoffs. And I just lean slightly that way. I don't think you can be mad about having either one of those.
I'd take either of them.
They're both in good spots.
Yeah, there's not really a wrong answer here.
Yeah.
I was just curious to hear y'all's thoughts on that. For the record, I would go with Halliburton as well. I think in offense, if this would never happen, right? I think if you could feature an offense with both of them, that would be something immaculate.
Yeah.
I am personally someone one of my absolute favorite teams of all time was the 7 seconds or less Suns, right? With Steve Nash. Halliburton just reminds me somewhat. You can run an offense based off of that, where like you're running this up tempo, high pace stuff, but it's not just whoever brings the ball over half court gets to shoot the ball. It's whoever brings the ball over half court is looking to get the team into the offense almost immediately, right? And I keep saying Mathurin. Halliburton is able to do that at a much higher clip than is basically anybody else in the league right now. That being said, I understand why Ryan wants SGA. The defensive prowess that he shows is incredible. He has the size and the ability and length to guard up, to guard down, and he has the physical gifts to stick with just about anybody when he chooses to do so. He doesn't always choose to do so, but he has enough guys around him that they make it work, right? I would go Halliburton. I think he's probably the best point guard in the NBA right now, probably. But that was my question for the evening.
I like it.
Good question.
Well, boys, on that note, we will bring this episode to a close. Appreciate all of the chat participation. It always makes the show interesting to have some insights and input from the fans. For everybody out there in Twitch land, Dad on Facebook, appreciate you every week. This has been another episode of Backyard Buckets, brought to you by Backyard Sports. For Ryan, for Bentley, for everybody here at Backyard Sports, we are out.